Welcome to The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. I'm Ken Ray.
I'm Nicholas Raba.
And I'm Nicholas Tacek.
Each week, we look at simple security practices, steps that you can take to make sure that your data stays yours. Because yes, there are people out there who want your information. Yes, even yours. Kind of makes you feel important, doesn't it? This week, we are starting at the very beginning. You just got a brand new Mac, or maybe you got one for the student in your life, somebody you're sending off to college or high school or someplace. Maybe mom and dad have finally decided to move off of Windows XP. Whatever the case, your new Mac still has that new Mac smell, which you might assume means that you're safe. And yeah, you might be safe, but you really don't want to risk that. So Nick and Nicholas have put together a list of 10 things you can do to secure your brand new Mac. This week, we're going to go over 5. And then next week, we're going to go over another 5. And that makes 10. I got to say, I don't see just buy a Mac on this list. I'm kind of bummed.
It's a little more complicated than that if you want to start things off on the right foot security-wise.
We spent a long time thinking that's all you had to do, though, didn't we?
We did. Things have certainly changed in the landscape for threats against computers, including Macs, over the past few years, though. And it's grown increasingly more important for everybody to be aware of things they can do to increase the security of their system, protect their data, and their privacy.
Now, in the future, we're going to be talking about things, for people who already have Macs, who are just finally waking up to the idea that maybe I haven't been as secure as I need to in the past. But we're starting today with a blank slate. Like I said, that new Mac is coming straight out of the box. I mean, the cool thing is, what was it? Step 1, take it out of the box. Step 2, turn it on. Step 3, there is no 3. Okay, well, actually, these days, there are a few more. Let's start at the very beginning. Multiple user accounts for multiple users on a computer. I guess I want to start with this one because I'm the only person who uses my computer. Should I have set up a guest account? Or, I mean, talk to me about why multiple user accounts are important, I guess.
Well, when you have the possibility even of other people using your computer, you might have confidential business files, or you don't want somebody to go ahead and delete all your podcast recordings. So if you had a guest come and visit, I assume you wouldn't necessarily want to give them full control over all of your data and documents. When it's just you using your computer and absolutely nobody else is, there's still a valid reason why you'd want to have at least 2 user accounts on your system. Basically, when you first install OS X, you have the first account you set up as an administrator account, which has special privileges, including the ability to install software, remove software, change settings. So it has a lot of ability to change things on the computer, which can be a problem when there are malware programs or other people accessing that account or anything else. So it's usually a good idea to set up a standard user account in addition to your initial administrator account. And you then use the standard one for your daily computer use.
Okay, so you're not just talking about like a guest account. So I've got mine, and then if anybody ever picks up my computer and uses it, it sounds like you're suggesting a minimum of 2, even if I know I'm the only guy who's ever going to use my computer, or the only person who's going to use my computer, and then a third one if I know that there's going to be a guest or another user in the house?
Exactly. The order of the way the accounts work for access and permissions to control your computer, you'd have at the very, very top level be the root user, and most users never have to worry about that. That's way, way down the system. Then you'd have the administrator account, which has all the control I just talked about. Next, you have your standard user account, which is limited in the sense that you can still do most of the stuff with the computer, but if you try and do an action like delete a program from the applications folder, it would ask you for an administrator password, at which point you could enter the username and password for your administrator account and finish performing whatever action you were trying to do. Then the lowest level are the guest accounts, and those have limited access. They can't change anything on the system. They basically can access the internet, or you can even set up parental controls to limit what applications they can even use. So it's the bare minimum to use the computer.
So is this something that your Mac is going to suggest to you when you go in, or is it something you have to know going in? I want to make sure that I follow these steps.
It is not something that's currently suggested by your Mac. However, Apple does recommend it on their page for best security practices, they do recommend setting up a standard user account. By default, however, the first account you set up has to be an administrator account. They don't really say, hey, you should set up a standard one as well.
But you totally should.
You totally should, but I guess, is it just that they don't want to confuse people? I mean, why?
Yeah.
If it's on Apple's best practices for security, why is it not something that they suggest people do when they open up their computer? Because certainly the second thing you do is not to go to best practices for security at apple.com and try to figure out, how to move forward.
Yeah, they want to keep things as simple as possible for the users.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, security usually takes a back seat to usability. And that's always been the case, but it's becoming more important to be aware of those things as we upload more and more of our digital lives onto the internet.
Okay, so this is something that we know now that we need to do. How do we do it?
Well, most all of these settings are going to be under your system preferences. This one specifically is under users and groups. When you click on users and groups, you're going to see a list of your user accounts on the left-hand side. The first one at the top will show your current user. Now, hopefully, you've already made a standard account, so it doesn't say that you're an administrator user. But if it does say you are, now would be a good time to make a standard account. And to do that, you'd click the plus icon under the login options on the left-hand side. And then from there, you'll see a new window come up where you could pull down what level access you want the user account to be. And you'd set up the username and password from here, as well as your password hint. Don't give too much information away in your password hint, otherwise your password's kind of useless.
What's the opposite of 1, 2, 3, 4?
And any of these changes, when you first bring up your user preferences, you may need to authenticate first to do any changes to the preferences, and you'll see a little lock icon in the bottom left-hand corner of the window. If it shows a padlock that is locked, that means you'll have to click it, enter your administrator password. If it shows unlocked, you're able to do the changes right there. But then when you're finished adding the user account, you can click that lock again, and it will lock it again for you.
You actually have to go back and lock it again, or does just leaving system preferences lock it?
It times out after a certain period of time.
Okay. Step 2. Require a password or 2 on the checklist, I suppose. Require a password on startup and when waking your Mac from sleep. This, there is very little that I consider a no-brainer as far as security is concerned, but this one has always seemed like a no-brainer to me. But talk to me about why it's important.
Basically, when you are leaving your computer, sitting there either in your house if you have guests over or at work or a coffee shop or wherever, hopefully you wouldn't be leaving your Mac completely unattended. You don't want anybody walking off with it, but basically anybody could go over to your Mac, click the trackpad or shake the mouse, and if your computer's asleep, it would wake up and go right back to all your files and everything else if you don't have it set to require a password when waking from sleep. Similarly, when you don't have it set to require a password on login, it's also called automatic login is I think the official name for it. When you start your Mac up, it starts up, logs into your account automatically without requiring you to enter your password, and access to all your files is immediately available. So if you're not the person sitting at your computer, you don't want to make it easy for some random person to just get at all your files.
You accidentally left your laptop at the airport. Somebody opens it up. You don't want it logging in automatically, giving them full access.
Yeah, this seems, honestly, not doing that just seems insane to me, no matter where your computer is. Like, even desktops that I've had in the past that I'm obviously not taking anyplace else have always had this. What I would liken it to is, at what point am I going to say, well, I'm only going to be gone for 5 minutes. I'll leave my car unlocked. Maybe if I lived way the heck out in the country, maybe. But any place I've ever lived, that's, of course I'm going to lock my car, because even if I'm only going to be gone for 5 minutes, even if I'm only going to be gone for 2, what if something happens and I'm gone longer? Or what if in those 2 minutes somebody comes by and says, hey, look at that stereo? Exactly.
And that's the important thing to keep in mind, is that when a lot of people don't consider security to be a primary concern, and they're more concerned about just, I want to access my computer easily, quickly, whatever. If security takes a back seat there, it's leaving you open to potential for bad things to happen, whereas it's the much smarter choice just to go ahead and make sure your computer's locked and secure from the start.
I always make sure to make it a best practice by turning on the screensaver hotspot in the corner, dragging my mouse down to it. So rather than just waiting for the screensaver to come on after 5 minutes, I just drag my finger down to the bottom corner and my screensaver is activated. And then when you shake the mouse or move the cursor, then it prompts you to type in your password.
And I got to think that this actually is one that Apple will prompt you to do, or am I wrong about that?
I believe this one might actually now be set by default. In the past, it wasn't. But I'm looking at a fresh install I have here of Apple's latest OS 10 El Capitan 10.11, and it does look like they have it set to require the password. I think it's 5 minutes after sleep or screensaver begins. You can change that if you want it to be longer. It can go all the way up to 8 hours. If you want it shorter, it can go down to 5 seconds or be an immediate requirement. So that does look like it was a more recent change in terms of the defaults that Apple goes with. But if for any reason those settings are different, if you have a clean install of OS X, but somebody has had made changes and they're just clearing out their own user accounts or something like that, that's still something to double check.
Okay. And you would double check that where?
That would be on the security and privacy settings screen in the system preferences.
Okay. On the checklist number 3, enable automatic updates. I have a question about this one, but you tell me why this is something that you consider a best practice.
Basically, whenever you have a software security problem that's known, the vendor of that program, whether it's the Apple with the actual operating system itself or a third-party developer with their program, when they become aware of a security problem or something that's being exploited in the wild, they'll quickly work to patch that so the bad guys can't use that as an avenue of attack. Mm-hmm. But until you have that software updated on your own system, you're still wide open. So if you don't have your computer set to check for updates, you're kind of just surfing the web or whatever, yeah, you might see an alert from your software, depending on how it's configured, that, there's updates available. You're busy, though. You don't, I don't want to do this right now. Click no thanks or later. And if you kind of get in the bad habit of doing that too often, you're giving more and more time that the bad guys could take advantage of the fact that you're not running the latest and greatest in terms of security patches. And then there's also the fact that a lot of times updates will additionally do things like add new features or fix bugs. So even if it's not necessarily security related, it can make your system more stable overall.
I got to ask though, so this seems like a particular case where you would want to, and forgive me, you're the security guys, and so I understand why you're saying what you're saying, but this feels to me like a case where you would want to decide what your balance is going to be on that. Because I'm thinking about times that Apple has pushed out an update, people go and immediately download the update, and all of a sudden they can't access X. Or it turns out there was an unforeseen bug, and now people aren't able to get back online. I mean, it was one extreme case that I remember from a few years ago.
There was a recent one even with people connecting with Ethernet a few months ago.
Right.
They did an update and they couldn't get online. That was a pretty bad one.
Yeah. So I mean, on the one hand, I see why you would want the security to automatically update, but I don't know. I mean, is there a subset to this? Like, is there a way that you would say, all right, I understand why you wouldn't want to do that? Or is it just, no, do that because, 99 times out of 100 or 9,999 times out of 10,000, you're going to be fine?
I'd say best practice for user would be to stay on top of it, to automatically have it download and do the updates. And under the App Store preferences, where you could select automatically check for updates, there's a couple of different checkboxes in there. One of them is download newly available updates in the background. This option tells you you'll be notified when the updates are ready to be installed. So it doesn't automatically install it, but it's there, downloaded, ready, and waiting for you, and it notifies you. The next one is install app updates. Those are your apps that you've got from the Mac App Store. And the next one is OS X updates. And finally is install system data files and security updates. And those are definitely the ones that, even if you don't do the big system updates themselves, the big major changes, the security updates are one of the most important things that you could have the latest, greatest of.
That would be, I would say, if you're only going to check one of those, do the system data and security updates one, because that will be the most critical, important updates, the things that could be used to attack your computer. So if those are installed automatically, those are vetted very, very heavily before they're released, and those very rarely have had problems that the system updates have experienced. So that's a good idea to at least have that one checked. And you might also want to have the first one checked that would download the updates. Even if it's prompting you do you want to install this update, at least you'll have it on your system. So if you're traveling and don't have an internet connection, or if you shouldn't be connecting to the internet because of whatever reason you're updating, if it's a bad security bug, you'd at least have everything all set to go, and you'd be able to install it at a time that's appropriate. And
you may have said this, I apologize. Remind me, where do you find that again?
Under the App Store, under the system preferences, there's an icon halfway down the page, App Store.
Okay.
And it'll be the main screen there. And it also will show you the last check, the last time you did a system update, the last time it checked. And you could click the Check Now button. Like, take a minute. See when the last time you checked was. If you don't have those automatically downloading the updates, take a second and press that check button.
Number 4 on the checklist, enable the built-in firewall. Not done automatically?
Still not done automatically. It has been disabled by default for years now, and it's something that a lot of security companies have given Apple a lot of flack for over the years.
Do we have any idea why they don't enable it automatically?
It would most likely be usability again. Okay. There are times when a firewall could cause conflicts with your Mac being able to communicate with either other devices on the same network, or letting certain programs that need to have access to your computer for communications back and forth. That could be problematic. So to avoid that, having users have a bad experience from the start, Apple has left it off by default. However, that can pose an issue.
Tell me why.
Basically, the way a firewall works is it will take a look at any other program or computer on the same network or the wider internet that's trying to connect to your Mac. Things that would be examples of one that would be useful would be if you have file sharing turned on, or remote access to your Mac. Any of those things where you could access your Mac's files across a network could potentially be an avenue where somebody is sitting on the same network at your coffee shop, and they're just checking all the other computers on the network to see what they can find. If you have the firewall enabled, it kind of acts as a line of defense where it will vet each attempted incoming connection and see if it's, there's a list of what's considered to be known attack signatures, and it will automatically stop those from hitting your Mac. Additionally, it can set your computer into stealth mode, where it's not appearing those services that you have running. If you have sharing available or anything else, it's not going to be apparent for anybody who's just scanning everything on the network. They have to specifically know that you're running whatever service. So it's not a super heavy duty line of defense there, but it's a good thing to turn on, especially if you're using your computer outside of your home. On your home network, where it's just you, as long as you have a secure home network, that might not be as big of a deal for users if they are experiencing problems using it. But especially if you're going to be out in public at a coffee shop or using airport Wi-Fi, anytime you're using somebody else's Wi-Fi network and you don't know if you can trust the network, would be a good time to make sure your firewall is enabled.
And Apple's come a long way as far as setting up the firewall. It used to be that you used to launch the program, it wouldn't work, and then you'd go into your firewall settings, you'd have to figure out what port things were running on. But Apple's come a long way with that. One of the features when you go to your firewall settings under security and privacy, once you have it enabled, is Firewall Options. From there, they have a list. You'll see the programs and whether or not they allow connections or they block connections. But one of the things you're able to do from there is add programs or remove programs from the list. Underneath that is a fancy checkbox. Automatically allows signed software to receive incoming connections. Checking this box, all the applications from the Mac App Store and the ones that have valid certificates will be able to allow the connections automatically. So majority of your trusted applications will be pre-configured there to allow the connections.
In this case, signed applications would refer to any app from the Mac App Store, as well as any app created by a developer who is participating in Apple's developer program. They receive a security certificate, which they can use to sign their software, and all of the apps in the Mac App Store have been vetted by Apple. So basically you're saying, okay, I'm going to trust that these apps are legitimate. Apple has the ability to revoke a certificate at any time should an app be found to be doing something bad. So that's basically a good catch-all, that you're going to have the best of both worlds, be blocking bad stuff from coming into your computer, but you'll also be allowing your apps to kind of work right out of the box if they're from the Mac App Store or a trusted developer.
Now, that leads straight into number 5 on the checklist for this week. Use Gatekeeper to limit the apps that are allowed to run. I know that I use a bunch of things that don't come from the Mac App Store. Remind me, there are 3 levels, right? There's only allow apps that come from the Mac App Store. Then there's like a middle level, which is sort of what you were just talking about, where stuff from the Mac App Store or stuff from developers that are participating in Apple's developer program. And then there's just, whatever you happen to find online. I mean, that's not technically what it's called, but I mean, that's basically the 3 levels, correct?
Correct. Basically, the best route for the majority of users would be the middle one, allowing apps that come from Mac App Store and identified developers. The level of entry for Apple's developer program is pretty low. It's something like $99 a year, and you can develop software for the Mac. But you're giving Apple the ability to block your apps if they find out from a security company or from the news or something like that your app is doing something bad. They have the ability to revoke the certificate, which stops your app from being able to be installed or being able to run on computers. So it kind of gives Apple a bit of control over what other developers are doing, but it's still allowing those developers to have kind of ease of use with the system where it's going to work out of the box for the majority of their software. There's not really any real reason that a developer these days should not be participating in Apple's developer program if they want to make software for Macs. By allowing the third option anywhere, that's really not a good idea. There's absolutely no vetting whatsoever for the apps that would be able to run. It can come from anywhere. It could be stuff that's known to be bad. Basically, it's never a good idea. And if you're encountering software out there that's requiring that setting, that's one of those times when you either want to think real hard about whether you really need that software or contact that developer and say, hey, could you sign up to be an Apple developer in the Apple developer program, because that way you'll get the certificate and you don't have to worry about users not being able to use your software or having to change their settings to use the software.
And if you select the third option, if you select anywhere, the system's going to bring up a dialog warning you that it's going to make your Mac less secure. And this setting, it resets automatically after 30 days if unused. So it's the second, are you sure you really want to do this? The default is cancel, but you could also keep going with it to allow from anywhere.
Am I right in thinking that if you allowed from anywhere, I mean, that just opens you up to all kinds of... I can't think of the right word for it, but basically if you click on an errant link at that point, I mean, you've got no protection, right? Because you've told your Mac, hey, go ahead and it'll run whatever looks good to you.
Yeah, generally, you still would have to double-click a file to go ahead and run it. But there are some instances where, yes, something could launch a program or download a program. But it's taking away one of the major lines of defense that your computer has coming right out of the box, which is Gatekeeper. And there's no real reason to be lowering the security there. It's just something to be very much aware of.
And if you do ever run into any application that runs outside of your setting, if you go to your security and privacy settings under General, it'll show you the most recent application that you tried to run from there. So if you indeed did want it to run it, it's there and you could proceed from that point.
And Gatekeeper controls are found where?
That would be under the General tab on the security and privacy settings in System Preferences. It's the lower half of the screen.
Allow apps downloaded from.
Next week, we will hit the other 5 items on the list, but if you just don't have that kind of patience, if you don't have that kind of weight in you, if you want to skip ahead of the rest of the class, you can actually go to securemac.com/checklist, where we have the whole list posted. That's all 10 items. No waiting. If you're loving this show or even liking this show, please share the like and or love by leaving a review on iTunes. If you know somebody who could use a bit more security in their digital lives, please tell them about the show and its associated site, securemac.com/checklist. And finally, if you have a comment for us or a topic you'd like to hear us hit, the email address is checklist@securemac.com. And if you have trouble remembering that, remember this: you are listening to The Checklist by Secure Mac. And we'll talk to you next week.